By faith. And remember what we said? We found out what faith is. Okay? By faith, Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed along with those who were disobedient, because she had welcomed the spies sent by the sons of Israel in peace. And what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel, and the prophets, who by faith, that is, with an enduring trust in God and his promises, subdued kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promised blessings, closed the mouths of lions, extinguished the power of raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became mighty and unbeatable in battle, putting enemy forces to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection, and others were tortured to death, refusing to accept release offered on the condition of denying their faith, so that they could be resurrected to a better life. And others experienced the trial of mocking and scourging amid torture and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were lured with tempting offers to renounce their faith. They were put to death by the sword. They went about wrapped in skins of sheep and goats, utterly destitute, oppressed, cruelly treated, people of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains and living in caves and holes in the ground. And all of these, though they gained divine approval through their faith, did not receive the fulfillment of what was promised, because God had us in mind and had something better for us, so that these men and women of authentic faith, would not be made perfect, that is, completed in him apart from us.
All right.
Therefore.
And then you have therefore. All right. Now, I'm going to read this in the New Century Version. We're going to kind of simplify what the Lord is saying in this passage that we just read. Remember, the writer of Hebrews is sharing this to teach us about the nature of faith. These individuals, according to verse 39, were approved of God, right?
Through their faith.
Yeah. None of them received what was promised. They lived their entire lifetime in loyalty and fellowship to God without receiving what was promised, because they couldn't receive it until you and I of this day received it. In other words, the people of the current day and the people of the olden time of faith receives the promise together at the same time. And this translation is going to be pointing that out very clearly. We call this translation the Heathen Bible around here, And so I'm going to read this for the New Century Version. Hebrews 11, verse 31. It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute welcomed the spies and was not killed with those who refused to obey God. Do I need to give more examples? Examples of faith. I do not have time to tell you about Gideon and Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. Through their faith, they defeated kingdoms. They did what was right, received God's promises, and shut the mouths of lions. They stopped great fires and were saved from being killed with swords. They were weak and yet were made strong. They were powerful in battle and defeated other armies. Women received their dead relatives raised back to life. Others were tortured and refused to accept their freedom so they could be raised from the dead to a better life. Some were laughed at and beaten. Others were put in chains and thrown in prison. They were stoned to death. They were cut in half. And they were killed with swords. Some wore the skins of sheep and goats. They were poor, abused, and treated badly. The world was not good enough for them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the earth. All these people are known for their faith, but none of them received what God had promised. God planned to give us something better so that they would be made perfect, but only together with us. That means us and them will be made perfect together. Who is going to provide that perfection? His name is the mediator, negotiator, Jesus Christ the Lord. Then the next verse is what?
Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses who by faith have testified to the truth of God's absolute faithfulness.
All right, so that would be these individuals in the 11th chapter.
That we've been talking about.
So that means the approved people of faith, talked about in Hebrews 11, tells us what faith does and what faith is about. And that verse tells you right there, we are surrounded by so great a crowd of witnesses. That is to say, we have a great cloud of examples of faith. Individuals that will receive the reward for faith when we receive it. And he says, therefore. So what is the next phrase in Hebrews 12:1?
Stripping off every unnecessary weight and the sin which so easily and cleverly entangles us, let us run with endurance and active persistence the race that is set before us.
All right, stop right there. All the individuals in Hebrews 11 were running a race. I think you can probably figure out that the race they ran was not a 100-yard dash or a 200-yard dash or a 400-yard dash or a mile dash. They ran a marathon. They lived their entire existence in loyalty and fidelity to God because they had, watch this, they had their minds set on the recompense of the reward. In other words, faith is loyalty and fellowship to God, to the place where you obey Him long enough to receive the reward that is divinely guaranteed when Christ returns.